One aspect about Grimgar Fantasy Vash that I find really, really interesting is that Ranta as a character is essentially a representation of the perverted character in anime. I know a lot of people are gonna be like, well, duh, Ranta's a gross perverted guy. Obviously, he's that character in anime. But the thing is that Grimgar treats a perverted character like you would treat a perverted character in real life. Very, very, very poorly. Ranta just happens to be one of the most resilient people ever when it comes to being insulted, and he tries to not care about what people say about him. That's not to say that the insults he gets don't affect him to some level. For the most part, he tries to let everything roll off his back. But I believe that Ranta and Grimgar's take on the perverted character is actually pretty unique. While yes, in certain times in Grimgar, people will just let Ranta be, because if you give him any attention, he'll get worse. Whenever Ranta pushes boundaries and starts to harass the girls, for example, most characters do give him a lot of shit. There's times in the story that characters have threatened to kill Ranta for his bad behavior. Chihiro, for example, is a character that genuinely dislikes Ranta to the point where she would probably let him die. Mary has bonked him multiple times on the head with her staff, and yes, I know that a lot of times in anime, perverted character usually gets a small little bonk in the head or some shit. In Grimgar, it's not just a bonk in the head. It's the relationships of the cast slowly breaking down because of Ranta's behavior. It's not just, oh, I hit you, now we're moving on with the story. It's, I hit you, and now I think lesser of you, and I will treat you worse as the story goes on. Ranta's relationships with people in the party start to devolve and get worse and worse as the story goes on. In Volume 7, for example, a character straight up picks up Ranta and throws him into a pile of worms or snakes. I don't remember what it was, but it was essentially him trying to test if Ranta would die to these things. And the only person in the party that showed any worry for Ranta's safety was Harihiro for like half a second. Everyone else was just like, well, I guess that's one problem taken care of. And obviously, he was fine, and they moved on with the story, but it was something that was a bit of a shock, because the only one they cared for half a second was Harihiro. And Ranta started to understand this the more and more he went through the story, to a point where even his own demon would just leave him in the middle of conversations because he found Ranta so annoying. His demon is actually his inner self. His demon actually gives a lot of good insight into how Ranta actually feels inside. While a lot of the things the demon says is very cryptic, he looks at Ranta and gives Ranta a lot of shit and insults him constantly. But when the demon talks to other people in the party, like Harihiro, for example, the demon is a little more shy, but he gives more positive responses to Harihiro. But even the demon at one point starts to disappear in the middle of conversations with Ranta, because even Ranta doesn't like talking to Ranta. And this is probably one of the only few times in the entire story where Ranta slowly starts to break down a little bit, because he does actually tear up when his own demon leaves him alone. Mary even comments about how even your demon doesn't want to talk to you, which is such a depressing thing. Ranta's perverted actions, his behavior is treated as toxic behavior. A lot of the bad and toxic things that Ranta says is never really treated in a comedical way. It's usually portrayed in a toxic fashion. Everything that he does when it comes to harassing the girls, for example, or asking if he can squeeze their breasts, is treated as a realistic portrayal of sexually harassing them. Ranta never actually goes through with any of his bad actions, but he constantly threatens to grope Chihiro, for example. And this is one of the reasons why Chihiro would absolutely let him die early in the story, and maybe even towards the middle part of the story. Ranta, a lot of the time, just doesn't really seem to know how to behave around other people. And this has to do with a lot of the stuff with his memory being essentially erased from his past life. For those of you who don't know, Ranta basically was born and raised into a very rich family where his brothers and sisters were all very successful. And his family, like his mom and dad, would constantly compare him to his more successful sibling, which ended up giving him an inferiority complex, which transferred over to Grimgar. And Ranta does not have an understanding of why he acts the way he does. He just knows this is how he acts. He even says in the light novel and in the manga that he just thinks this is how he is. He doesn't want to be anything that isn't himself. And he doesn't really have the maturity to change properly until later in the story. But I really just like how Grimgar as a story treats perverted characters the way they're supposed to be treated, with disgust, contempt, and with, quite frankly, sometimes violent outbursts. Some people straight up would kill Ranta on the spot. Ranta's bad behavior is also used to show the maturity of the other characters in the party. Early on in the story, Ranta tries to have a peek at the girls in the bath, and because of Ranta's shitty behavior and the guys not exactly doing everything in their power to stop him, the girls felt very uncomfortable around the guys for a couple days. Eventually, Yume and Haruhiro have it out and just talk about the problem, and they discuss what was wrong, how to do it better, yada yada yada, and they just have a nice little mature conversation. Much later on in the story, like around volume 7, the girls are taking a bath again, except this time, Kizuku and Haruhiro don't let Ranta go anywhere near the girls taking a bath. And in fact, Kizuku pins Ranta down to the ground for more than a couple minutes until the girls are done bathing. This shows that the other guy characters have at least grown and changed and developed a lot more and understand that Ranta is not really someone that can be trusted around women, and it shows how good of people they are next to him. It also shows how little trust they have in Ranta as a person. Grimgar also does something a lot of other animes don't do. If the character that is being the pervert is a part of the main cast of people, it is usually treated as a comedy thing, not a serious problem thing. Not many anime, some do, but not many, have the female character be mentally affected by the stuff that the character is saying. Chihiro and Yume specifically talk to Haruhiro about the fact that Ranta talking about their bodies and their imperfections make them feel very uncomfortable, especially Chihiro, who has very, very bad body dysmorphia. But Ranta's personality and the things he says and him picking at their imperfections make them feel very, very bad. And their mental health suffers because of it. But to close out the video, I really like how Grimgar takes everything it has in the story very seriously, especially this aspect of the storytelling, because I'm very tired of the same perverted character. Haha, he's funny. Oh, he got smacked. Oh, yada, yada. Like, no, it's treated very seriously. It's an actual big problem in the team, and the toxicity of Ranta's personality with his relationships with everyone else on the team is actually a problem. And the story itself does build him up to be a better person much later on in the story, but for a very long time, you have to sit there with the characters and deal with Ranta's imperfections as a person. But anyway, if you guys enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, share it, tell me in the comments down below. Let me know what other characters you want me to talk about from Grimgar Fantasy Bash.